try to cover all of that span, because really a lot of it, when you read through it, a lot of it has to do with one king between Israel and Judah, the kings that died and what they, and the one that came up to replace him and what they did in order to, be mentioned in this particular book. And so I want to concentrate more in chapters 9 and 10, because it really is going to paint a picture that is kind of, it's a little different, a little difficult to kind of really understand. And I want to start in chapter, and we're going to go to 1 Kings. That was Elijah. Hold on, let me make sure that you're exactly what I need. So after, yeah. We are in, this is chapter 21. First Kings, chapter 21. And we're going to okay, actually, we're going to be a little further than that. This is chapter 19. This is where yeah, 1 Kings chapter 19. So remember, this is when Elijah was escaping from Jezebel. Because Elijah did what?
Kill all the prophets.
Kill all the prophets of Baal, right, and those of Grove. So now, once that happened, she issued a decree that she was going to kill him. So he runs off. He goes up to Horeb, and then God sends him back, right? But in the process of sending him back, he has him do something. So we're going to start in chapter 19, verse 15. And the Lord said unto him, Go, return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when thou comest, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu the son of Nimshi shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abimaholah shalt thou anoint to be prophet in thy room. All right, so those are the three things he asked Elijah to do. And as we journey on, as you read this, some parts seem to repeat themselves. And what we have to remember is that sometimes when you're reading the Old Testament, something is recorded, it's said, but what happens actually comes later. So it kind of messes you up. You think that what's being said is happening at that point, and really it doesn't. It happens later on. Okay. And when it does happen, it almost seems like it's something different, but it's actually the Word of God coming to pass And it can be confusing. That's why the Old Testament is a little difficult to understand. It's not a clear path in terms of chronological sequence. So everything that he says doesn't come in sequence, and sometimes it's out of sequence. And if you're reading it, and then you come across it again, it seems to be something a little off with it because of the sequence in which it's written in. So remember the three names that he just gave you. He said he wanted Elijah to anoint Hazael, king over what? Syria. He wanted him to anoint Jehu,
king over Israel.
15th verse, right? 15th verse, that's what we read.
15 and 16.
19 and 15. So let's do it again. He wanted Hazael to be anointed king
Over Israel.
Syria.
Over Syria. Okay. Then he wanted Jehu to be anointed over Israel, and Elisha to be prophet in his room, or he would be the next prophet that would fill the position that God desired, that God had Elijah in. So those are the three things that happened. So as we transition out of the first Kings into second Kings, we see Elijah going on the journey, right? And Elijah following him. So once now Elisha is in the room, then Hazael is the next thing that happens. So he mentions those three, but those three don't actually come in order. Right? That's what I need you to see. So the first thing is Elisha actually takes over in place of Elijah. We know that part.
Right.
But then we go to 2 Kings chapter this is sometimes a little bit. 2 Kings chapter number. Let's go to chapter number 8. Yeah. Chapter number 8, verse number 1. It says, Then spake Elijah unto the woman, whose son he restored to life. So that's the Shunammite, saying, Arise, and go thou and thine household, and sojourn wheresoever thou canst sojourn. For the Lord hath called for, not, and it shall also come upon the land. So this is him letting her know, or the people know, that there's going to be a famine in Israel. All right, 7 years. And it says, And the woman arose and did after the sayings of the man of God. And she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines. And it came to pass at the 7th year, 7 years in, that the woman returned out of the land of the Philistines, and she went forth to cry unto the king for her house and for her land. And the king talked with Gehazi. Who is Gehazi? The servant of, who is Elisha. Okay. And it says, and they came to Damascus. Oh, I'm sorry, I went too far. And he talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, Tell me, I pray thee, all the great things that Elisha had done. And it came to pass, as he was telling the king how he had restored a dead body to life, that, behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life cried to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, my lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha has restored. And when the king asked the woman, she told him. And so the king appointed unto her a certain officer, saying, restore all that was hers, and all the fruits of the field, since the day that she left the land, even until now. So that was the Lord blessing her for her obedience to go in that moment. It doesn't tell us about anybody else, right? So we don't know who else may have been given the word to leave. All we know is that this woman did. And when she came back, her lamb was gone, and the king, based upon the story that Gehazi gave him, restored everything that had been lost. All right? So then we go into the next part of this. And verse 7, and Elisha came to Damascus, and Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, and the king said unto So, Sister Brooks, did we lose you?
Yeah.
Okay. We are in 2 Kings, chapter number 8, verse number 7. I'm sorry,
Number 8.
verse 8. No, I wanted her to start where we started.
Okay.
That would be verse 7.
Okay.
To Damascus. And Ben-Hadad,
Okay.
the king of Syria, was sick, and it was told him, saying, the man of God is come. And the king said unto Hazael, right, the names will get you. So what did we just talk about? Who were the three people that I led off this lesson with? Who is the king of Syria? So he is abiding in that the place where he's supposed to, right? So because he's been anointed by Elijah to be king, and he's been king for a while. But now God is about to do something to fulfill his word, right? And so this goes on to talk about because Hazael was sick and he heard that Elisha was near, he told his servant Hazael to go and ask, was he going to recover?
Right.
So what does Elisha say to him? I don't want you to read it. I just want to know if you read it. No. Okay.
Yeah, no, he did say no.
He said, nope. He said, yes, you will recover, but you're also going to die. And that was confusing, right? So it says, this is verse 10, and Elisha said unto him, go say unto him, thou mayest certainly recover, howbeit.
The Lord has showed me that
He surely died.
So if you're going to recover him, why are you going to let him die, right? And it was confusing to the one that was being spoken to, right? So now remember, Hazael is actually the servant, and I think I misspoke earlier. Hazael is the servant of the king of Syria. He is not king yet, but God is moving him into position to fulfill his will, right? So they visit the man of God. The man of God says to him, Hazael, no, your king is going to recover, but he's going to die. Who's going to replace him? Hazael. But now Elisha begins to weep. And he weeps because God has also shown him what Hazael is going to do. he says he is going to, at verse 12, and Hazael said, "Why weepest, my Lord?" And he answered, "Because I know the evil that thou wilt do unto the children of Israel. Their strongholds wilt thou set on fire, and their young men wilt thou slay with the sword, and will dash their children, and rip up the women with child." And Hazael said, "But what is thy servant a dog, that he should do this great thing?" Really? What is it? Why do you think I'm going to do this? Right? Am I just some dog that has no conscience and no understanding? Right? And I'm just going to do this without any real compassion or understanding? And he says, and Elisha answered, "The Lord has showed me that thou shalt be." So that's when he knows now that that's where he's headed. He knows now that he's about to become, even though Elisha knew it already, because he was with, I take that back. Even though God had appointed him when Elijah was still living to be king, he hasn't been king yet. So now he's becoming king. But Elisha is seeing that in him doing so, he's going to cause conflict and pain in Israel. Right? Even though he is going to be king of Syria. So we have, see, that's one of the confusing things about the Old Testament. There's so many things that it's dealing with at the same time. Right? And it really requires you to kind of focus in, because if you don't, you'll get off track. So he says, verse 14, so he departed from Elijah and came to his master, who said to him, "What said Elisha to thee?" And he
told me that thou shouldst surely recover.
Okay, he told me that you're going to recover. That was the last thing he said to Ben-Hadad. Because what does he do in the next verse?
And it came this morning that he took a thick cloth and dipped it in water and spread it on his face, so that he died. And his head reigned in his stead.
So he kills him.
You know, just
Who killed him? They don't say nothing about nobody.
well, it said,
Well, if he died, that means somebody had to kill him.
he spread it on his face.
He took a rag, a thick rag, and put it in water and put it over his face. You ever tried to breathe through a rag that's full of water? And you know why you haven't? Because you can't.
Oh, king, I thought the king did that.
Hazael did it to the king. So Elisha told him that he's going to recover, but he's going to die. He didn't tell him that you were going to kill him, right? He did say that you are going to be the one that's going to cause Israel pain. But then at the end he told him, and you're going to be king over Syria. So when he tells him that, he goes back and tells Ben-Hadad, you're going to recover. And then the night he tells him he's going to recover, he kills him.
But you're going to die.
Right? He didn't tell Ben-Hadad that, no. He didn't tell him he was going to die. He just said, yeah, you're going to recover. But so you see how difficult it is for us to get information, right? Because with knowledge comes responsibility. But it can't always be used in a sinful fashion. And that's what Hazael did, right? He used it in order for him to take control of Syria, which is what he did. All right? So that's Hazael. Oh, okay. And so he says, and Hazael reigned in his stead. And so we're going to go from that verse, and so there's just some joining information toward the end of that just tells you that there were two nations that were underneath Israel, Edom and Libnah, and both of them revolted. And so they were in a very contentious moment. And so the rest of that kind of deals with that. I want you to go down to verse 28. It says, and he went with Joram, the son of Ahab, to the war against Hazael, king of Syria, in Ramoth Gilead, and the Syrians, Joram, right? And King Joram went back to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had given him in Ramah, when he fought against Hazael, king of Syria. And Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Joram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel, because, okay, all right, so that kind of sets up everything, because chapter 9 then takes you into something that I would like to just give you a synopsis of, but really, it really requires that we read it so that you can really understand it, okay? So let's see if we can get through this. I'm gonna pick this up. We're gonna go through it, and I want you to, if you get to a place, and I'm gonna try to stop it in the right places. But if you get to a place where it's confusing, stop me so we can talk about it. Okay? Are we good?
Yeah.
All right. 9 verse 1. He says, and Elisha the prophet called one of the children of the prophets and said unto him, gird up thy loins, and take this box of oil in thine hand, and go to Ramoth Gilead. And when thou comest thither, look out there Jehu, or look for Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, and go in and make him rise up from among his brethren, and carry him to an inner chamber. Then take the box of oil and pour it on his head, and say, thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. Then open the door and flee and tarry not. You got that part, right? He said, once you anoint him, you better get out of there real quick. Yes, yes, because, and you'll see it, you'll understand it a little better as we continue on, but I wanted you to understand that the instruction he was given. All right? So, verse 4, so the young man, even the young man the prophet, went to Ramoth Gilead. And when he came, behold, the captains of the host were sitting. And he said, I have an errand to thee, O captain. And Jehu said, unto which of us, or which of all of us? And he said, to thee, O captain. And he arose and went into the house. And he poured the oil on his head, and said unto him, thus saith the Lord God of Israel. Now, wait a minute. Now this is Jehu. Okay. So, just want you to make sure you know who we're talking about. This is Jehu. Jehu is in Israel. All right. So, he says, the Lord God of Israel, I have anointed thee king over the people of the Lord, even over Israel. And thou shalt smite the house of Ahab thy master, that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord at the hand of Jezebel. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish. And I will cut off from Ahab him that pisseth against the wall, and him that is shut up and left in Israel. And I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, the son of Ahijah. You're right, Ahijah, well, you gonna say And the dogs shall eat Jezebel in the portion of Jezreel, and there shall be none to bury her. And he opened the door. All right, so he got out of there. So in doing so, he has just now anointed Jehu to become the king over Israel. Right? Okay. And so, but he says what he's going to do is bring to pass everything he said about Ahab and his house. And so Ahab, we know what he did, but he says he gave him that consequence or that judgment because of what he did, because he continued the sins of Jeroboam, right? Because of their idolatry. And because Jezebel was such a sinful and egregious woman in how they went about doing serving their God, that since she made a decree against the man and the people of God, God now is coming against her. Okay. All right. So let's see if we can pick this up. So now the son. The prophet that has been given this task, he runs off. Verse 11, then Jehu came forth to the servants of his Lord, and one said unto him, is all well? So remember now, this was done in a back room. So the only one that was in there was the prophet and Jehu. And Jehu initially was in a room with all of the other captains. So he may not have been the one that would have been king next, but God chose him for a specific reason. So that's why it was necessary for him to take him, because if he had done it in the front of all of the others, he would have caused such a commotion that they would have been killing each other. All right, so you're with us. Okay, so is it all well? Wherefore came this mad fellow to thee? So why did this crazy dude come up to you? And he said unto them, ye know the man and his communications. And they said, it is false. Tell us now. And he said, thus and thus spake he to me, saying, thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. Then they hasted and took every man his garment and put it under him on the top of the stairs and blew with trumpets, saying, so guess what they did? They accepted it. Even though they just said, what did that crazy man say to you? And he said, no, don't pass it up. No, he says, and they said, it is false. He said, whatever he said to you is false. And then when he says that he said, I'm going to be anointed king, all of a sudden, they change. And they accept him as king. Okay. Y'all with me so far?
Say that I have anointed 3 kings.
The
king over Israel. Okay.
Right.
That he had done. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so they now blow the trumpets and say he is king.
Yeah, right.
So verse 14. So Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now Joram had kept Ramoth Gilead, he and all Israel, because of Hazael, king of Syria. So Joram was a propped up king because he was being helped by Hazael. Okay, and let's take a little moment to breathe on this one.
I didn't get that 14.
You didn't get 14?
No.
All right, so Jehu, who is the son of Jehoshaphat. Now Jehoshaphat is actually the king of Judah.
Okay.
But he says Jehu is the son of Jehoshaphat. And he says the son of Nimshi. Wait a minute. So Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. And Joram is working in alliance with, have been working in alliance with Hazael, was the king of Syria.
Right. Okay.
It says, but King Joram, verse 15, was returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had given him, in battle, when he fought with Hazael, king of Syria. He says, and Jehu said, if it be your minds, then let none go forth, nor escape out of the city to go tell it to Jezreel, because he didn't want that city to now to come help. All right, we're still good? So Jehu rode in a chariot and went to Jezreel, for Joram lay there, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, was come down to see Joram. And there stood a watchman over the tower of Jezreel, and he spied the company of Jehu, and as he came, and said, I see a company. And Joram said, take an horseman, and send to meet them, and let him say, it is peace. So there went out one on horseback to meet him, and said, thus saith the king, is it peace? And Jehu said, what hast thou to do with peace? So what do you know about peace? Right? He says, turn thee behind me. And the watchman told, the messenger came to them, but he cometh. So the messenger that went out to speak to Jehu, he killed him.
Okay.
So he didn't take the message back.
Okay.
All right. So when he doesn't, he says, verse 19, then he sent out a second on horseback, which came to them and said, thus saith the king, is it peace? And Jehu answered, what hast thou to do with peace? Turn thee behind me. And the watchman told, saying, he came even unto them and cometh not again. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu the son of Nimshi, for he driveth. So he's coming after, right? He's coming in that direction. And it says, and Joram said, make ready. And his chariot was made ready. And Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, I'm going to get it right in a minute, king of Judah, went out, each in his chariot, and they went out against. But now remember Jehu has been anointed by the son of the prophet by direction of Elisha to be king over Israel. But now the kings of Israel and Judah have come out to fight him. Okay, so I didn't want y'all to miss that part. All right, verse 21 again. And Joram said, make ready, and his chariot was made ready. And Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, went out, each in his chariot, and they went out against and met him in the portion of Naboth the Jezreelite, right? Naboth's vineyard, right? He says, and it came to pass when Joram saw Jehu that he said, is it peace, Jehu? And he answered, so long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are. And Joram turned his hands and fled, and said to Ahaziah, there is treachery, O Ahaziah. And Jehu drew a bow with his full strength, and smote Jehoram between his arms, and the arrow went out at his heart, and he sank down in his chariot. Then said Jehu to Bidkar, his captain, take up and cast him in the portion of the field of Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember how that when I and thou rode together after Ahab his father, the Lord laid this burden upon him. Surely I have seen yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, saith the Lord, and I will requite thee in this plat, saith the Lord. Now therefore take and cast him into the plat of ground according to the word of the Lord. Right? So this was God getting vengeance against against Ahab, right? And his family because of what they did to Naboth. Right? And this was him bringing to pass what he had said he would do. All right, so now verse 27, he says, but when Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw this, he fled by the way of the garden house, and Jehu followed after him. So now, remember, Jehu drew a bow and smote Jehoram.
Yeah.
So now he's after Ahaziah. He says, but when Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw what Jehu did to Joram, that's when he fled by the way of the garden house. And Jehu followed after him and said, smite him also in the chariot. And they did so at the going up to Gur, which is by Ibleam. And he fled to Megiddo, and died there. And his servants carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem, and buried him in his sepulchre with his fathers in the city of David, because that's where they buried the kings of Judah. Right? All right. And he said, and in the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, began Ahaziah to reign over Judah. All right. Now I know you're probably lost in there somewhere, aren't you? But we're gonna try to button this up because it'll be a little clearer as we keep going. All right. So verse 30. And when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tied her hair, and looked out a window. And as Jehu entered in at the gate, she said, had Zimri peace who slew his master? Had Zimri peace who slew his master?
Yeah.
Well, remember,
That's the first guy.
because Zimri is, I think, the son of Omri, who was a king in Israel. But remember, the line of succession in Israel is really muttered because servants were killing kings and then taking their place. And so it has still been happening, right? So, so at this point, that's what Jezebel says. So, what right do you have because you aren't really king? That's what she was telling him. You aren't really king. Okay. So he said, he entered and said, had Zimri peace who slew his master? And he lifted up his face to the window and said, who is on my side? Who? And there looked out to him 2 or 3 eunuchs. And he said to them, throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall and on the horses. And he trode her underfoot. So he rolled over. Yeah. And when he was come in, he did eat and drink, because he didn't care, and said, go, see now this cursed woman, and bury her, for she is And they went to bury her, but they found no more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. Why? Because it says, wherefore they and told him, and he said, this is the word of the Lord, which he spake by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, in the portion of Jezreel shall dogs eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the carcass of Jezebel shall be as dung upon the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel, so that they shall not say, this is Jezebel. So they ate her, left her skull, her hands, and her feet, and then their defecation, them going and having a bowel movement was spread across the fields,
Right.
so that the word of the Lord could be fulfilled, because it said, and the carcass of Jezebel shall be as dung
Yeah.
upon the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel. Right? So he ain't done. So he's paying, he's getting revenge for everything that Ahab did. Okay, so now Jezebel's dead. They've already killed all 70 of his sons. At least I think. No, that's the next chapter. They kill all 70 of his sons. Right? Which is right? And so where is that?
That's 10.
Yep. So 10 is the chapter that you really kind of brings it all together. So I want you to kind of understand this. And Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. And Jehu wrote letters and sent to Samaria unto the rulers of Jezreel, to the elders, and to them that brought up Ahab's children, saying, now as soon as this letter cometh to you, seeing your master's sons are with you, and there are with you chariots and horses and fenced cities also and armor, look even out the best and meetest of your master's sons, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. So he says, put him on the throne, and then stand with him and fight, so that he'll keep his reign. And okay, so it says in verse 4, and said, behold, 2 kings stood not before him. How then
Shall we stand?
So the 2 kings before him didn't stand. How is he going to stand? Right? So he says, and he that was
Over the house, and he that
was over the city, the elders also, and the bringers up of the children, sent to Jehu, saying, we are thy servants, and will do all that thou shalt bid us. We will not make any king do thou
that which is good
in thine eyes. So they just said, whatever you tell us we'll do, we'll do. Right? So they're talking to Jehu, who, right, he is not in the line of succession from Ahab's children, but he has just conspired to have all of his sons killed. Right? And the people saying, okay, because we just saw what you did to the 2 previous kings, we are not going to stand in your way. All right, he says, then he wrote a letter the second time to them, saying, if ye be mine, and if ye will hearken unto my voice, take ye the heads of the men of your master's sons, and come to me to Jezreel by tomorrow this time. So he gives them 24 hours. Now the king's sons, being 70 persons, were with the great men of the city, which brought them up. And it came to pass, when the letter came to them, that they took the king's sons and slew 70 persons, and put their heads in baskets, and sent him them to Jezreel. And there came a messenger and told him, saying, they have brought the heads of the king's sons. And he said, lay ye them in 2 heaps at the entering in of the gates until morning. And it came to pass in the morning, that he went out and stood and said,
to all
Ye be righteous. Behold, I conspired against my master and slew him. But who slew all these? In other words, I killed the king, but guess what? You killed his. Okay.
But he asked who killed him.
Right, but that's what he's saying. He's actually, it's a rhetorical question because he knows who did it. He's saying you all did it because I told you to. Yeah, that's why he was asking the question, so that they would have to answer. We did. Right? You with me, sister? Okay. All right. So, what verse we at? 10. All right. So, know now that there shall fall nothing of the word of the Lord. So, you see what he's talking about? Which the Lord spake concerning the house. For the Lord hath done that which he spake by his servant Elijah. So Jehu slew all that remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, and all his great men, and his kinfolk, and his priests, until he left him none. All right, now let's kind of understand who Jehu really is. All right, so verse 12, it says, And he arose and departed and came to Samaria. And as he was at the shearing house in the way, Jehu met with the brethren of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and said, Who are ye?
And they answered,
We are the brethren of Ahaziah, and we go down to salute the children of the king and the children of the queen. And he said, Take them alive. And they took them alive, and slew them at the pit of the shearing house, even 42 men, neither left he any of them, because they were coming to visit.
but he killed all.
He killed all of them. And, verse 15, and when he had departed thence, he lighted on Jehoiada, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him. And he saluted him and said to him, Is thine heart right? As my heart is right, as my heart is with thy heart. And Jehonadab answered, It is, if it be, give me thine hand. And he gave him his hand, and he took him up to him in the chariot. And he said, Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. So they made him ride. And when he came to Samaria, he slew all that remained in Samaria, till he had destroyed him, according to the saying of the Lord, which he spake to Elijah. Right? So that Jehu did a lot of killing.
He sure did.
All right. Now he did it be based upon the direction of God's what he told he would do, right? Because remember, he had been anointed by Elijah, right? But Elisha was the one that actually did it. But God told him that Jehu would be, put in that position,
Yeah.
right? But now, this is going to get you, so stay with me. All right, so at verse 18, and Jehu gathered all the people and said unto them, Ahab served Baal a little.
But Jehu shall serve him much. Now
Now,
therefore,
did you just kind of miss that? So he says, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu shall serve him much. We're not talking about God. We're talking about Baal. But who has he been killing for? For God. For God. But he is now proclaiming his allegiance. Well, exactly what nation is he king over? Israel. But he just said he serves Baal.
Yeah, he served Baal a little.
You served him much.
And this ain't somebody else saying it about him. This is Jehu speaking about himself. All right. So, there's some points you gotta take in. You gotta get. Right? Okay. So here we go. Verse 19. He says, "Now therefore call unto me all the prophets of Baal, all his servants, and all his priests. Let none be wanting." Don't let none escape. "For I have a great sacrifice to do to Baal. Whosoever shall be wanting, he shall not live." But Jehu did it in subtlety, right? So what does that mean?
We didn't do it all at one time.
No. Subtle means crafty or cunningly. So what he's doing is drawing out everyone, now that he's killed all of Ahab and all of his house and everybody associated with him, even his priests, he killed all of them. Now he has gathered all of the people because he's getting ready to do the same thing.
He's gonna do his own people like that?
So who he gonna be king over?
All right, so understand, what is he first asking them to do? To come for a sacrifice. And who are they sacrificing unto? Baal. So he's cunningly drawing out everyone that is serving Baal. And so he starts it by saying, Ahab served Baal, but Jehu serves him much. So that everyone would think that they are now going to just continue on as they were, serving Baal. But that was his trick. That was how he gets to this point, to weed out everybody and separate the ones that served God from the ones that were serving Baal. All right? All right, so let's go back. He says, that was 19, right? "For I have a great sacrifice to do to Baal. Whosoever shall be wanting, he shall not live. But Jehu did it in subtlety, to the intent that he might destroy the worshipers of Baal. And Jehu said, Proclaim a solemn assembly for Baal. And they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent through all Israel, and all the worshipers of Baal came, so that there was not a man left that came not. And they came into the house of, and the house of Baal was full from one end. And he said unto him that was over the vestry, Bring forth vestments for all the worshipers of Baal. And he brought them forth vestments. And Jehu went, and Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, into the house of Baal, and said unto the worshipers of Baal, Search and look that there be here with you none of the servants of the Lord, but the worshipers of Baal only. And when they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings, Jehu appointed 80 men without, and said, If any of the men whom I have brought into your hands escape, he that letteth him go, his life shall be for the life of him. And it came to pass, as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, that Jehu said to the guard and to the captains, Go in and slay them, let none come forth. And they smote them with the edge of the sword, and the guard and the captains cast them out, and went to the city of the house of Baal. And they brought forth the images out of the house of Baal and burned them. And they break down the image of Baal and break down the house of Baal and made it a draught house unto this day. What is a draught house? It's an outhouse. Right? He said, made it an outhouse unto this day. Thus, Jehu, keep reading, sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. Jehu, not from after them, to wit, the golden calves that were in, and that were in. Okay, read that again, just so you'll get it. Howbeit, from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, Jehu departed not from after them.
With the golden calves that were together and that were in.
Okay, so what did that verse just tell you? All right, let's read it
He didn't
again.
depart after them.
After
Didn't
the,
leave.
no,
They killed on,
They killed all
See, because of the way it's worded, that's why it throws you off. It's just the way that it's worded.
He didn't depart from them.
He didn't depart from what? So let's read it again. And this time we're going to, because look at what he was doing, right? We see what he did. From verse 26, it says, and they brought forth the images of the out of the house of Baal and burned them. And they break down the images of Baal and break down the house of Baal and made it a draught house unto this day. Thus Jehu destroyed Baal out of Israel. Howbeit, it said, howbeit means however. From yeah, this is my page. Howbeit, from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, Jehu departed not from them.
He didn't leave them.
He continued to do the same thing. Even though he had now been used to purge Baal, he didn't depart from serving the idols that were still there. Because there were two idols still there. In, what does it say? In Dan and in Bethel.
Right.
Those golden calves were still there. And so because he didn't destroy them all, verse 30, and the Lord said unto Jehu, because thou hast done well in executing that which is right in mine eyes, and hast done unto the house of Ahab according to all that was in mine heart, thy children of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. But Jehu took no heed
To walk in the law of the Lord God of Israel with all his heart.
for he departed not,
From the sins of Jeroboam,
which made
Israel to sin.
So
He just
some of the
stayed- he
things
just kept on.
destroying the people that's there.
So look at the extent to which he went, right? He destroyed Ahab, all of his sons, all of his priests, any of his kinfolk, anybody that was associated with him, anybody that came to visit with him. Then he went to Samaria and killed the rest of anybody that had anything to do with him. Then he came and to the people and said, everybody that serves Baal, Jehu serves Baal much. I serve Baal a whole lot.
Yeah.
But he brought them in to serve Baal. He had his men, after they had made the offering, he had his men close down the building and he killed all of them. But he made sure, he says to the people that were in there, he says, look out, search out, or seek out among you and make sure that there are nobody next to you that serves the Lord. Because he didn't want to kill any of them, and he didn't. So only people that were in that service was the people that served Baal. Once he finished the offering, he burned the statues, he tore up everything that was associated with Baal. And except for those two idols, because those two idols were in Bethel and Dan, they weren't in Israel. Right. And so once he did that, the Bible says, howbeit, verse 29, that, thus destroyed, 28 says, thus Jehu destroyed Baal out of Israel. Howbeit, from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, Jehu departed not from after them that were in Bethel and that were in. So the Lord spoke glowingly of how he executed the judgment that he has sent, right? Because thou hast done well in executing that which is right in mine eyes, and has done unto the house of Ahab according to all that was in mine heart. Thy children of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. So up through the fourth generation, he's going to allow Jehu's family to stay on the throne, right? But he says, in doing so, this is what we needed to understand, that Jehu took no heed to walk in the law of the Lord God of Israel with all his heart. For he departed not, even though he had done such a great thing in executing everything that was in God's desire in his eyes, in his heart to do. Jehu did it. But he was still not someone that followed the Lord. Because he was executing God's judgment against the house of Ahab and against Israel. And he still was not somebody that walked in the law of God. Right? So it's a remarkable thing how when we look at the Old Testament, right, we see that God used Gentiles to punish Israel. And how he did it is he allowed them to come in and do things to them, right? Take them into captivity, kill their families, right? Because he was executing judgment, because in the Old Testament, remember, we're dealing with the law. God didn't operate under grace in the Old Testament. He did give some grace, right? He did, because what happened to Ahab? When Ahab repented, what did God do? He told him he could live. And he allowed he said, I'm not going to take the kingdom from you, I'm going to take it from your son. And that's what he did. And you would think, well, if he was that bad, why didn't he just kill Ahab? Nope. Because there is compassion in God. There is.
He did something that he know that Ahab loved. Didn't like, nothing to happen to the son. God was punishing him that way.
Ahab.
Yeah.
Right? But he told Ahab, I'm going to remove everyone in your family that pisses against the wall. Which means I'm going to kill every man in your family. Didn't he do that? Yeah. Then how does you have to understand that he didn't remove him, he didn't do it in Ahab's time.
Okay.
He didn't do it to Ahab. But he waited until after his son. Yeah. And then he took the kingdom from him. And he did it in a remarkable fashion, because he took somebody from another land and brought him in and made him king. And then that person, Jehu, was the one that executed everybody, even though he wasn't really anyone that served God. And then Paul says, is there unrighteousness with God? Because we have to remember his ways.
Not our ways.
And they're past finding out. It's beyond us to comprehend it. because he's the only one that can see the end, and it's his plan. He's the one that understands who he who he raises up, and who he brings down. We may not agree with what he does and how he does it, but he never asked us our opinion. You know, and so when we read some of the things, especially from the Old Testament, it's really hard for us to understand some of the things that he did, because Jehu wouldn't be somebody that you would think he would have used. But that's exactly what he did. And he did a great thing. He said, Jehu, you did wonderful, except for one thing. You don't really love me. And just he said, I'm gonna let you and your son stay on the throne for 4 generations. After that, I'm going to take it. And that's what he did. If I'm just going to set you up and bring you back down, why do it in the front?
Right.
Why don't I just put somebody in there that's going to do right anyway?
Right then.
Well, what's the problem? He couldn't find nobody that was willing to do right. Lord have mercy. So, I know that was long, but I just wanted you all to see how sometimes the Lord worked in the Old Testament, and see how specific. This was a specific thing that he allowed Jehu to do, and how he used him to do it, and then told us at the end that Jehu still didn't serve him.
No.
But you're using somebody that. Yeah. All right. So look, let's finish this, because the end of this has to do with I think Jezebel, right? Where we at? 27. Oh wait a minute, I think I slipped. Yeah, the wind took my praises. Okay, it says, in those days the Lord began to cut Israel short, and Hazael smote them in all the coast of Israel. So remember, Hazael is actually the king of Syria, because that was the anointing that Elijah was given to appoint. So he says, from Jordan eastward, all the land of Gilead, the Gadites and the Reubenites and the Manassites, from Aroer, which is by the river Arnon, even Gilead and Bashan. Now the rest of the acts of Jehu, and all that he did, and all his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehu slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. And Jehoahaz, his son, reigned in his stead, in the time that Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria, 28 years. God gave him and his sons to the 4th generation reign, even though Jehu served Baal much. So go back and read that one, because I just want you all to be square on that. Because after that, when you would get into 11 and 12, 13 is where Elijah actually died. Right. And he becomes sick. The Bible doesn't say what he becomes sick from. It just says he becomes sick, and then he dies. Right?
What do you want to read? 11?
Yeah. 11, 12, and 13. Just finish it up, just so you'll know how it ends. And go back and read over that, just so 9, 10, and 11, just so that, you know, see if you can still follow it, because it's a lot to follow.